I have a boatload of questions. We probably won't get to it all today, so I
Hit me,
hope
man.
that we're gonna come back to these issues. But my first question is: people like your former colleague at Fox, Bill O'Reilly, pushed the culture of poverty to explain the economic struggles of inner city Black and Brown communities. You recently seemed to distance yourself from that belief. What made you rethink your position?
Oh man, this is one of the biggest changes in my thinking, period. So for decades, you had to answer the question like, why? Basically, why is there so much crime in Black neighborhoods? Because there is, and why are things so screwed up? And a lot of people looked at this, not just right wingers, most famously Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the Democratic senator and liberal from New York, who wrote a 1965 study on it and came to the conclusion that when families break down, chaos ensues. And that seemed right. And so over time, conservative think tanks, conservative intellectuals, and then conservative pundits took up this argument that, things were messed up in Black America because there was a culture of poverty that was embedded by government subsidies that divided families. And there was a lot of truth to that. The part that was untrue was that it was specific to the Black community. I could go on for an hour, but just in one sentence, what changed my mind and made me realize that economics had a much greater effect on people's behavior than I ever realized was going to the same town in rural America my whole life and watching the culture change when the jobs left. So basically, I spent my whole life in this town, live in the town half the year still. And I watched as all the jobs went away for a bunch of reasons, but mostly because of trade agreements. And none of the men had full-time employment. Most of the women still did. They worked in hospitals and schools, but the traditionally male, and there's a massive gender divide in work. I mean, no one wants to say it, especially in blue collar work. It's a massive divide. And where I lived, the men all worked in the woods, cutting down trees and sending them to pulp mills to make paper and saw out lumber. And those jobs disappeared. So what happened was men started to make less than women, and women didn't want to get married because, and there's a ton of sociological research on this. Women in general don't want to marry men who make less than they do. So people kept having kids, but they stopped getting married. And all of a sudden, you had the same social pathologies, no violence, I will say that is one difference. But you had, in general, the same social pathologies that you see in the inner city. Like nobody had a dad at home. Lots of people are on drugs. Civic associations fall apart. Like all the things that sociologists wrote about the Black community for all these generations are turning out to be true in 100% white community. And you're like, oh, wait, this is my conclusion anyway. This has to do with economics. If the men can't make enough, families don't form. Like it's kind of that simple. So this is not an ideological point. It's not a left-right point. It's just it's a true point. So I said that on the air and immediately got attacked by feminist groups. That's not true. Well, it is true. And there's a mountain of research to back it up. So yeah, I started to feel like, well, I don't know, like maybe we were a little bit judgy about the Black community, the inner city community, because I didn't realize that a lot of this behavior, which is bad. I still think that it's bad when you don't have a dad at home. It's bad when your kids are out late at night committing crimes like that. I'm not going to make excuses for that shit. Why would I? But that is driven by forces that people in these neighborhoods can't really control. You know what I mean? Like global trade, like this stuff has an effect on the family structure. Anyway, that's it. It's like a pretty obvious point, but for some reason, no one wants to address it.